part 4, part 2 of today. So verse 20 of Isaiah 57, it says, but, no, it doesn't say but, it says, and, vav he, that's and the, resh shin ayin, and then the plural yod mem. Well, resh ayin means harm, wicked, calamity, evil. Well, what's resh shin ayin? It's kind of the wicked ones, those doing the wickedness. Resh ayin can also mean those doing evil and wicked, calamity, impairment, bringing injury. Resh ayin and resh shin ayin both are wicked, but this is, it seems to me, it feels more like the people that are doing the resh ayin is the resh shin ayin. Anyway, well, see, now wait a minute. Suddenly, this is a contrasting verse to what we just read. He just said in verse 19, create this fruited produce of eloquent, flourished expressions of my lips. What did I say? How do you make it beautiful? How do you make it tasty and desirable? In order to accommodate the unlikely blessing that for 3,000 years, because of the customs of your forefathers and yourself, have completely obliterated any sight of, how do you bring that back? How do you make that happen? Which is kind of like, well, why do we fast? And you didn't say it's not about the fast. That's why. Talked about that last week. It's not about what you eat. It's not about whether you put food and water into your stomach. It's about, do you have a heart for his self? Do you have a heart for his words? Can you break the bonds of the oppression of those who have been lied to and given bad religion when this is the truth of the truth? But the wicked, those who are determining harm and injury, resh shin ayin. See, it says kayam, kaf yod mem. Well, kaf prefix means like, yod mem is water or the sea, S-E-A, like the sea, like the ocean. Well, water doesn't do anything. Water just sits there. Yeah, but you've seen waves. That's not the water doing that. That's other forces making the water do that. Other forces push the water into a funnel, a spin, a vortex. Other forces make water turn into waves or turn into a storm. Water is pushed around. You raise this up and water's going to flow down. That's just what it does. Water always just moves wherever other forces push it. So the next word, nun, gimel resh shin. Nun, well, nun is the prefix, means that which pushes or forces, and then you get gimel resh shin. Garsh. That makes me think of Goofy. Remember the Walt Disney Goofy? That was his favorite saying, gosh, gosh. And I say that so you'll have picture imagery stuck into your mind with some of these words. It means stormy, raging, or this driving force, a storm-tossed sea. But, you know, we're assuming that noon's a prefix. If you look at noon gimel rish, that's nagar. Whoa, you can't say that word. Yeah. Shin's not a suffix, but nagar, we're just looking at the first 3 letters. What does that mean? Thrust down, delivered over, poured down, stretched out, dragged, attached, and carpentry work. Nun gimel resh, NGR. It's like, but the wicked, like the sea, is pushed around, delivered over, has no capability of its own to do anything about it. It's subject, like a carpenter who uses a saw and a planer and a nail gun. It's like the wood is just sit there and takes whatever you do to it. That's an NGR. That's a storm-tossed sea. So when people refer to other people as that, it's a dominating tyranny of oppression and affliction, which is another definition of the wicked. And then he says, kaf yod, because hey shin kuf tet. The, hey, is the prefix. Shin kuf tet. Well, shin kuf tet means rest, quiet, unconcerned, pacified, peaceful, or calm. Because quiet, rest, because unconcerned. Well, see, if kaf yod means because, but it means also for, thus, when, while, although, if, kaf yod, it's kind of like this hand, that's a kaf, and yod is mine, it's just shaped like this, is a grabbing, like my strong hand. Kaf means like as a prefix, yod means my as a suffix, so there's a prefix and a suffix with this word. Just interesting, the two letters that represent hands, the 11th letter and the 10th letter. You know, the interesting thing, if you misspell that word, shin kuf tet, and write kuf shin tet, that means to make straight, decorate, or arrange. It's the word for truth. So it's kind of like, well, rearrange the same letters that mean this decorated, arranged, beautiful truth, which is also another word for bow, B-O-W, like a shooting a bow or a rainbow. It means completely unconcerned or peaceful. This doesn't have the English syntax where you can just plug the letters in. So you got to look at this and say, the wicked, are they at rest and quiet and unconcerned? Are they pacified and peaceful and calm? Is that what he's saying? Or does it mean like the water, like the new NGR, they're subject, they can't do anything to defend themselves. They can't do anything about what's happening. They're just incompetent, incapable. Yahoo is saying the way the universe is built is those doing wicked are subject to the driving force of any other storm or any other movement of, you know, an earthquake under the ocean causes a tsunami, tidal wave. To say the rest, quiet, and unconcerned, pacified, peaceful, calm means they can't affect anything. Then it says lo, which means no or not, negative, yod, vav, kaf, lamed. Well, if you look up yod, kaf, lamed, those are three letters in the alphabetic sequence, numbers 10, 11, and 12, and it means to have the power and capacity to prevail, to contain it all. So if I read the alphabet as Yeshua being crucified at Zion, thrown into the tomb at Het, round rock rolled in front at Tet, Het, Tet, Aleph, we're going to bump into that word. It also means sin. Yod suffix, Het, Tet, Yod, that means my sin, or I've incurred guilt. So it also means sin sacrifice. So he did this as my sin sacrifice. I'm now showing you the mental processing. I'm reading the alphabet letter sequence as a way of decoding the spelling of the words, correlating the Old Testament with the New Testament and finding validation for something that would have otherwise seemed to be disparate. It reconciles because of the alphabet letter sequence. In the natural alphabet 22-factor chronological sequencing. And then I can plug it back in here and say, but he, going through that experience of that death, that mortal ceasing, coming back as a reborn, he will have the power and capacity to prevail and contain it all, whatever that entire experience is. And he says, I'm doing this to lead you in my wake, in my trail, in my train. But see, here it says, the wicked are at rest, unconcerned, or they can't do anything. They have no power to prevail. They can't contain anything. They're subject to all forces. And then he will gimel resh shin, garsh, that's the same word again, but with a yod prefix instead of a nun that we read earlier, which means drive away or expel or be divorced or produce a fruit. Stormy, raging, mem, yod, mimi. Well, if I read the word as mem as mayim, well, that's watery. He will be driven away. They are like water. But see, if I look at the mem as the prefix, and I'm just saying that, you know, you can look at the obvious translation. If you get like an interlinear, like Green's interlinear is a pretty famous one, they can just tell you one meaning of the word. Mayim, well, that's waters. Water. Well, yod mem is sea, mayim is water. This means watery. But if I look at mem as the prefix, it's one who is something, or it's away from something. And then, so then you got yod, mem, yod. Well, if I look at yod, mem, yod, yod's prefix means, or suffix means my, yod, mem, nun is right hand. Yod, mem, aleph is a seaman or a sailor. So it's somebody who navigates on the water. So I can say, navigating on the water, well, that's thinking and meditating, pondering, navigating by the spelling of words. And this word yod mem nun is the word for right hand, like ben yamin, son of my right hand, but it also means auspicious and prepared and appointed. So you'd say, wait a minute, Adam, the human being, man, was created by Yahuwah Elohim Zavot to have the mind of consciousness to navigate his communication with an understanding of walking in righteousness, zadikah, yields victory, because the balancing of scales, the mishpat, and Yahweh's throne is established on mishpat, is that righteousness brings victory, because the word victory is also zadikah. There's other words for victory too, but zadikah is not just righteousness, it's also victory, deliverance, salvation, and justice. So if you want justice in a cause, if you want victory in a conflict, only do what's righteous. That's what he's saying. But he's saying those who do resh shinai and wickedness got nothing. They can't tip the scales in their favor. They got nothing. Well, if you're in a balance of scales between this side and that side, like in a game, a basketball game, or some sort of conflict, a battle, a war, which side gets the victory? According to Yahuwah, the way the universe is built is that the side, the team, the ones doing righteousness get the victory. And then we're told, oh, it's not who has the best horses, it's not who has more soldiers in their army, it's not who has more money to throw into the conflict. Yahuwah retains the position of providing victory in any conflict as the tipping of the scales, so that the mishpat, and then there's a verse that says, zadikah like water. In other words, water finds its flow downhill. When you do the weight, zadikah is weighty, which is kavod, which is glory and honor. And then there's a verse that says, wickedness weighs nothing. So when you're in conflict with wickedness, they got nothing to put in their side of the scales. But see, what it takes then is having this a consciousness, this awareness, this mind of saying, who is Yahweh's Zavot? How did he build this place? How does it work? And what am I supposed to be doing? I'm supposed to be doing zadikah, righteousness. Well, what the heck is righteousness? Be a good boy. Yeah. What am I supposed to do? Fast, don't eat. Well, that's not what he said. Isaiah 58, as we talked last week, he says, unshackle the oppressions on each other. Well, how do you do that? With truth, tell the truth. And when he gave us the Sabbath day, you look at 1 John chapter 3, I believe it is, it says, sin is not doing the Torah. That is the definition of sin. And righteousness, by definition, is doing what he said. So if our enemies took over our culture and our country, they sit in government offices, they sit in courthouses, they sit in banks, commerce, but suppose they also sit in the pulpit. And suppose our enemies say, there's no Torah to keep. You're free, woo, you're free, you don't have to keep the Torah. So all the good-hearted people that would otherwise be happy to do it, Yahweh Elohim required his people to do, they don't do it because they're told there's no Torah. Not only is there no Torah, if you think that you should, you're now offending your Christ. Your God is now going to be greatly offended if you think you should walk in the ways of that Old Testament deity who said, keep his Torah. And so I've heard the voice, I've read about people who are vehement about, don't you tell me my King James English book says, no, it says what you think it says because of the way the preacher has interpreted it. But there's this big conflict, there's this clash. Who's the real authority? Is it Yahuwah or is it JC? Who's God? Well, they're both the same. No, they're not. They're not both the same. So on the one hand, like what Mark says, well, tear out the page. Michael Rood said the same thing. Tear out the white page of paper between Malachi and Matthew because it's a continuous flow. There's no interruption. But once you read closely, I think there ought to be a concrete wall, like the Berlin Wall between Malachi and Matthew, because of what it's been turned into, meaning a different concept of the character of the God, a different day of the holy day is the first day of the week instead of the Kadosh seventh day. Different festivals, Christmas, Easter, Halloween, Sunday, and whatever other ones, as opposed to the Moedim of Leviticus 23. A different people group instead of the 12 tribes of Israel, descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. You got the church, the bride of Christ, who don't have to do anything. They have a different covenant, different name, different day, different festivals, different people group, and different covenant with that people group, which supersedes the other guy's thing. And then so in studying the Torah, you realize the covenant of light, of truth, of reality, or Vavresh, expressed, revealed. That's the Torah. If it's perfect, why would he do away with it? Why would Yeshua come being the Torah and say, yeah, we'll have no more of that crap? You are it. You invented it. What do you mean you have nothing more to do with it? Well, something went wrong, and so we got to have a newfangled, wait a minute, isn't that the word achar? And so what I realized in looking at the language is that the word Elohim acharim is not just other gods or gods of others, those guys. It's my God. My God was an Elohim acharim. My dear Jesus was an Elohim achrim based on reading the Torah. He was not something that my forefather Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Daniel, Joseph, I mean, none of those guys would have recognized him if they're worshiping Yahuwah as a vote, Elohim of Israel, as per his Aleph-Beit Tav of the Torah. And so this whole thing has been 20 years of trying to figure out what's the truth. And once you find the truth, you go back to that verse 19. It says, Borah Nov Shofetim, Shalom, Shalom, Lak Rachok Vela Karov. And then Yahweh will heal us. Well, and reveal the secret parts of the document. That's a pretty good promise. But those doing the confusion, the wickedness, the distortions of keeping everybody in bondage, not only will they be driven by the storm, Yahuwah is going to send the storm. He's the guy that rules nature and is going to cause the storm to overwhelm these guys. But the next two words are resh, pei, sheen, which is stomp the feet, muddy, turbid, befouled, but it's also humiliated. And then the word vav, tet, yod, tet, which means muddy or clay, and it means to erase or something drafted. Drafted. Is that like a draft horse, a horse that works? Or is that to be drafted or sucked into the military where you have no choice? Or to get drafting paper and draw plans in pencil where you write them, then you erase them. It's like, what does this word mean? But if he's saying, like the storm-driven sea, befouled, muddy, turbid, humiliated, and erased. Well, then, as we hear news items of big plans for September 23rd, from what some people are saying, it's like, oh, no. It's like, no. I just got to do what Yahweh says. Borah, Nov, Shofetim. And he's going to send a storm to take these guys out. Well, that's how we get his attention. And that's how he engages our plight, our predicament, with his attention. And then the last verse of Isaiah 57, Ein shalom, Amer Yahweh, la rashayim. Ain't no peace. Commands, declares Yahweh for the wicked. Yeah, but they look like they're sitting peaceful in their big houses with all their wealth and all the. He declared, Aleph Mem Resh, Yahweh Amered. And I see Amer, it's this like fine high words like Declaration of Independence. It's the statement of, it's not just a word, it's just this powerful decree of the emperor. No rest for the wicked. Now, we in the news, lifestyles of the rich and famous, are they wicked? Or I'm not trying to evaluate anybody's personal life, but what I'm saying is anybody doing wickedness has this promise: no rest. And there's nothing they can do about it because they're going to be driven like the sea under powerful winds controlled by Yahuwah, the emperor of the elements. Yeah, but the world is run by the devil. No, it's not. I refuse to believe. In my consciousness, I don't believe that the world is run by the devil. Yeah, well, it was given to Adam and Adam gave it. Yeah, they told us that. They've told us a bunch of stuff. I don't believe it. I choose to believe David in Psalms 24. King James English. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. Why? Because he built it, thus possesses it. Kuf Nun Hey. He formed it upon the floods, established upon the seas. It's all his. I don't assign ownership of any part of the world to the devil other than the hearts and minds of people who don't trust Yahuwah. Okay, so then we look at the very next verse is Isaiah 58:1. Kra begron, Kuf Resh Aleph, call out, begron. Well, Gimel Resh Vav Nun is the word for throat. So cry with a throat, Aleph Lamed, towards Tav Het Shin Kaf, Chosek. Well, that's dark. Call a throat toward darkness, Ka Shofar, like a shofar. Haram, Har is mountain, so it must be mountains. Kol Ka, Kufav Lamed is voice, Kaf suffix means your voice. Vav Hey Gimel Dalet, Hagad, there's a word Haggadah. Haggadah, that's the story you tell at the Seder. It's a story, it's a myth, it's a legend, it's the telling a narrative. La Ami, Lamed Ayin Mem Yod, Lamed unto or belonging to, it's just people, so it's my people. Peshin Ayin Mem. Well, Pesha is willful sins. Va lavit. Well, Bet, lava Bet. Bet is house. Yaakov, that's the house of Jacob. Het tet aleph tav mem. Tav mem suffix, that's the end of the verse, 58 verse 1. So het tet aleph is sin. So he says, Isaiah, get out and yell at my people and tell them, you better stop it, you dirty, rotten sinners. Knock it off. You're doing that wrong. You got the wrong calendar. You keep mispronouncing the word, dang it. Is that what he's telling his people? Let's look back again. The first word, kara, means call out, but it also means learn to read. Well, see, I took that personally. Learn to read. It's the first word of Va'ikra, Vav Yod, Kuf Resh Aleph, otherwise known as Leviticus. It's not Leviticus. Well, it can mean call out, but it means to invite, summon, to learn to read. So the Makra Kadesh, another way of describing the Moedim, is to have these, go out and invite to come together and learn to read. Why learn to read? Well, we have prayers, we have liturgy, we have worship songs, we have oneg, food, we have, it means learn to read also. That's why a Karaite, Nehemiah Gordon is known as that great sage, the Karaite Jew. That means one who takes scripture literally. Kuf Resh Aleph, Karaite. Learn to read, begron, of your throat. The word Bet Gimel Resh, there's that Vav Nun suffix again, one who is doing bagar. You know, what do you say to a little kid? Hey, you've gotten bigger. Why? Where do we get that word bigger? It's Hebrew, bet gimel resh, and it means to become adult, to grow into, to fill up into a maturity. Gimel resh, gar, because bet could be a prefix, means proselyte, nonsense, chatter, gargle. It's a small grain or granular, glutton, gobbler, like a turkey. It's page 107 inclines. And it means to pick berries or scatter berries. Igor is like the sidekick of the mad scientist. He's always named Igor for some reason, but it means to be afraid. So what does that mean? Learn to read. In your throat, if you're a proselyte, you're not even a Jew. It's not your native language. It's like these rocks. How do you pronounce Hosek? The het is like, it's just, yeah, it feels ugly. I'm afraid I'm doing it wrong. Aleph Lamed is motion toward, then there's the word Hosek. But Hosek, yeah, it means dark, like in day one of creation. There was darkness, and then he created light. So darkness is the opposite of light. But it doesn't just mean darkness. Look at the dictionary, it means to be held back. It means ignorance, illiteracy. It means to restrain, withhold, something kept on reserve. Well, if it's on reserve, that means it has a potential which hasn't been manifested yet. Something is being held back. When you might have a longer winter than usual, spring is held back for whatever weather conditions, but it's just waiting to break loose. Chosek. And then the great thing about Klein's is that it has etymologically, other languages, related words, and an Arabic same pronunciation of Hosek is a piece of wood stuck in a goat's mouth, a baby goat mouth, to prevent it from sucking. Well, El Shaddai is the great provision that we're supposed to be suckling on. It also means obscure or low or a secret place. So this word Hosek, it's saying there's a secret place which isn't ignorance and dark, where your promises, your shalom has been restrained and withheld, but it's still on reserve. And if you learn to read, even though it feels like rocks in your throat, gobbling like a turkey, it'll get better. Just keep developing it. Don't be afraid. Project it like a shofar, but the word shofar means to beautify with splendor, adorned, embellished, improved. Well, that's like the first word in Isaiah 57:19, Borah Nov, Shofetim. So now he's saying the wicked, they can't do anything about this because they're doing wickedness. But you who are seeking righteousness, you who learn to read, to beautify, to ameliorate, to get everything he's always promised our entire family for the last 3,000 years that was thrown away, held back on reserve in the darkness, this is how you get it. Learn to read and proclaim like a shofar. Hey Resh Mem. Well, Hey Resh is mountain. Resh Mem is great. There's no yod, so it's not harim. It's not the mountains. Could be, because sometimes I don't put the yods in vase. But Resh Mem is something big. Ram is where you get the word Rome or Romulan, and it means to raise up. It's a big deal. What big deal? The only thing that's a big deal is that now we're going to get this kingdom back. Raise your voice like a shofar. Learn to read. The big deal, the next word is kolka, your voice. But see, kuf vav is also hope, and lamed kaf is to you. So your voice can be read as the thing that you were given to hope for. He told us what to hope for. The restoration of the kingdom, the restoration of his favor upon us, the overthrow of our enemies and adversaries, oppressors and overlords that were only imposed as a punishment. You see, there's some people that I've heard say the Torah, the book of the Torah, was given as a curse of tyrannical overlord. The Torah was to punish them Jews for the golden calf incident. And they look at Ezekiel, I think it's 2024, as a proof of that. And it's I disagree completely. He gave us our enemies because we wouldn't walk in his ways. And Ezekiel 20 is all about that. We could talk about that again some other time. But here he says, raise your voice like a shofar, having learned to read, and getting that piece of wood out of stuck in your mouth that's been preventing you from receiving all that El Shaddai has for us. Vehagad, well, Hey Gimel Dalet could be the Gad, the God. God, Gimel Dalet, well, that's the name of the Canaanite deity of fortune and luck. It also means to get your veins ripped out of meat, but it also means the story. So it's the story. The tribe of Gad was known as a troop, or it was known as one who was going to go on raids, like Viking raids, or the Huns, or the Mongols, or any military cartels that are engaging in terrorizing cities even today. But the point is, there's a story. What's the Haggad? What is the great story? It's written right there in the alphabet. What is the great story? Yahweh chose for himself a people. He gave them the truth. He gave them a sworn promise that if they walked in his ways, they get outrageously blessed 7 times, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing. But if they betrayed him and walked away from his instructions, they would get cursed 7 times, pressed down, shaken together, and overflowing, until the duration of the curse was fulfilled, 2,730, which is for the northern kingdom, 390 times 7, Ezekiel 4, Leviticus 26. And then we can come back. Well, it was over as 2010. As of 2010, we've got a wide open shot at coming back. Coming back to what? Learn to read, walk in his ways of righteousness, and the proper identification of our Elohim, which he has retailed. See, the word Moedim, festival, feast, means, ayin dalet, means witness and testimony. It also means bejewelment, ayin dalet yod, and adornment, ornamentation. He's ornamented his identity with these things he loves, this testimony of his kingdom, of his identity, of his intent, of his place, of his righteousness, of his victory, of his rulership of the universe for eternity in all dimensions, and Mashiach being Yahusha. All that is somehow wrapped up in the Moedim by definition of the word. And then for the church at large for 2,000 years, both the Orthodox and Catholic and Protestant, to eject the Moedim is its own statement of identification that they're not declaring the same identity as Yahweh's Avot. That's just by definition. Okay, so then the rest of this verse, tell this story, Haggad la'ami, to my people. The word lamed ayin is also the word for throat, besides the word groan. But then it says pei shin ayin mem. Well, pei, my mom used to say, pish tosh. Where does she come up with that? Pish tosh? That's something from the 1940s? I don't know. But you look in the dictionary, pish means haughtiness and folly. It means to just step over the line. It's like, you're just an idiot. Willful sin. But if you look at Shin ayin mem, it means boring, dull, melancholy, tedious. I've encountered people express that kind of attitude about the Torah, about the Moedim, about the Sabbath day, about Hebrew. It's like, whatever, blah, blah. I'm just boring, depressing, tedious, dull, and so of a heart willingly not engaging it, which is to say willingly walking away, is pish tosh. Well, that's the opposite of chafetz, het pays adi. It's an opposite inner driving force within the volunteer to find pleasure, seek pleasure, declare pleasure. I'm going to determine what he said in Psalms 58 later. I'm going to declare the Sabbath day a delight. As if there was a power in the declaration that made it so, as some people have said about other matters. And then it says, to the house of Jacob. Well, it's Vav, Lamed Bet, Yod Tav. Well, wait a minute. Lamed Bet is heart. Lamed Bet Yod is my heart. The Yod Tav suffix is, this is what I have declared. So I could, is it the house of Jacob, or is it my heart is what has been pishtashed, considered to be boring, dull, and tedious. And then Jacob, Yod Ayin Kuf Bet. Well, Kuf Bet means to rise up. Ayin Kuf is the following in the wake. Jacob was told if he walked in the ways of Yahuwah, he would rise up because there was something following in the wake. What follows in the wake? Reward, reparations, welfare, retribution. That's the word shalom. So I could read that the word shalom is what follows in the wake of your behavior, of your attitude, of what you do, is the promised compensation for what you do. Well, that's the same meaning as the word debar. These are synonym words. Debar, that raft pulled behind a ship, that what follows you at the end of your labors. So the word for heritage, the word for promise, the word for what you were told to hope for, the word shalom, the word Jacob itself. And then here's this word, their sin. Tell them their sin. You guys, wait a minute. The word sin is het, tet, aleph, tav, mem. Tav, mem is a suffix meaning there. Het, tet, aleph. Well, het's a fence. What's a tet? Tet's the round rock, something round, something that rolls, something that spins. Tet aleph is a word means to spin or to sweep. Put a noon in front of the tet. So look at noon tet aleph. Noon's just this action prefix that means thrust aside, to throw out a net, stretch out, incline, bend, extend, inflect, or conjugate. To voice inflection, to change, to conjugate a verb is to rin, ran, run, run-ing, have, ran, have, will. It's like, how do you find the other ways to see this? Like 50,000 Protestant denominations. Jacob has thrown away, has stretched out and conjugated himself with all the other cultures instead of with Yahuwah. And he's gotten his reward. But on reserve, there's kept the reward. If we go back to create the pure exhibition of what he actually said. If you run down, there's this one word that I had mentioned originally in verse 2, which is Yod, Shin, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Nun, Yod. Like they haven't forsaken me and they ask my judgment. Well, that word Shin, Aleph, Lamed is ask, but it also means, the Yod prefix means he will, the Yod suffix means me, Vav, Nun, doing my, he will ask, doing of me, what? It's not just ask, it means to borrow, to beg, to get something on loan, to inquire carefully. It also says in the dictionary that means to use words metaphorically. So now you're having to read into this and going, what does he mean by this? When would you metaphorically interpret something? Well, we talked last week about the book of Song of Solomon, that Rashi and Akita, I think, rabbis looked at it as metaphor, not just exactly what it says. But how, if you don't know that, how are you going to do the study? Borrow words from other languages. Well, that's the etymological dictionary. That's doing interpolations. Interpolation is where you have to stand in the middle and you mediate this language and that language, which is what I think is the great thing about Klein's dictionary. But he's saying here, not neglecting or not deserting or abandoning. And then there's this action task, borrowing, inquiring carefully. It seems like what it's saying is study the construct of language. What is Adam? There was one guy that used to say, human beings are speaking spirits. Okay, we're plugged into a body. What are we? We're alephs. Let's say Aleph is the immaterial essence of an individual being with a consciousness. That's an Aleph. Plugged into a Bet, a body with ability to mobilize, Gimel, and make decisions, Dalet, and give an instruction, I suggest you make this decision, hey, and then Vav, like engaging a gear shift with intention, you do engage as per your decision. So the Vav is the engaging of the decision Dalet that was recommended at hey, and then Zion is a cutting off, a stopping. So you could look at that as saying, well, you drive until you come to your destination and stop, or based on what you decide, you're cut off, which is to say you're either one of these or one of those, like the sheep or the goats, the wheat or the tares. See, I could read the first 7 letters of the Aleph-Bet as what is, what am I? I look like a human being, a monster, but what am I? I just know I have a consciousness and I find myself in this body. What's it going to be later? When you die, does your consciousness cease? And then all of a sudden, some mysterious day in the future, but you wake up and it's like, oh, I'm back in my body. Or I've heard people talk about this on the books and internet and talk shows and radio and stuff of near-death experiences. Nobody really knows for sure, because once you're on the other side, you can't come back and say. But there's this concept that some have that when you die, your consciousness doesn't stop. Your consciousness, you're laying there and you're feeling bad and it's like, oh gosh, can't this just be over? Say if it's a lingering illness. And the next thing you know, you're still alive and your consciousness is looking at your body laying there and you go, what? I'm not in that body anymore. And then kind of like that movie Ghost, other beings, whether they're dark or light, they kind of take you away. And I've heard stories that some were taken by light beings who turned in to be evil monsters. And how did the person come back? That's another story. But what I'm saying is, does your consciousness ever stop? We don't know. The body stops. We don't know. So people who are tired of this life, of the struggle, of the decisions, of the, oh gosh, I just want to be over so I can just go to sleep and lose my consciousness and not have to think about this stuff again. And then as soon as you die, you're thinking about it still because you're still a consciousness and now there's nothing you can do about it. See, while we're alive, there's something we can do about it. We can hope, we can pray, we can read, we can think. This body is a machine by which to affect not just our eternal destiny, but even affecting what's going on in the world around us. He gave that to Adam. And somehow we're so distracted with got to eat, got to work, got to run, got to go to school, learning what? Well, I've heard people say, and I've said, they've lied to us about history, lied to us about science, lied to us about religion, lied to us about medicine, lied to us about nutrition, food, and lied to us about, well, at least we know we can build things. If we can be a construction worker, and that's real stuff. I could go down to the store and buy some building materials and enclose it in a building to live in, and then I take the remnant to go throw it away in the dump. And they say, you can't dump that here. That's toxic waste. What? Oh, that's right. Tar paper and asbestos bacular linoleum and fiberglass and what's in the drywall. Oh yeah, that's all toxic. You can't dump that in the dump. And yet you're selling it that I'm supposed to build my confined house and live in it and breathe it? Are you kidding me? Yeah, we're lied to constantly. Lied to about what's food, what they put in the food, what they put in the water, what they put in the air. It's like If we had any idea how much we were lied to, and yet what I've found for myself, knowing these 22 letters is the one and only reality of truth. And it looks like Yahuwah Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, kept and retained this reality through the nearly 3,000 years of tormenting distortions, just so we could come back to it right now and retrieve it and turn everything around for our benefit when we do so. But I've never heard that preached. What's preached is, well, there's a coming tribulation and there's a coming rapture and there's a coming, but never this, never this story, never Israel coming back out of the grave like Jesus coming out of the tomb, a fractal model, a prototype, Israel coming back to earth out of the grave. Yeah, like Ezekiel 37. The whole house of Israel coming back to life? What about Resurrection Day when we fly up into the sky? Well, then what's the first resurrection talked about in, was it Revelation 20? 1,000 years? There's a resurrection where the righteous come back to life, but not the wicked? Who are they? Come back to this earth for 1,000 years. I can go down here to Home Depot and buy 50-year caulk or lifetime caulk. They're hoping I'm not going to live much more than 50 years once I apply that stuff in my, corners of my siding. But what if I live to be 1,000 years? You're gonna how many tubes of that stuff? How many times are you going to have to tear the house apart and rebuild it if it only lasts 50 years or even 100 years? 10 times to live 1,000? He had people living 1,000 years in the first generations before the flood, right out of the Garden of Eden. If he has bookends of Moedim, Passover, the evening of the 14th, right into the 15th day of unleavened bread, and then you keep that for a week, and then in the tail end festivals, you've got Sukkot for a week, and then the last day, Shmini Atzeret, it's like 1 and then 7, 7 and then 1. It's like this bookends. What if he was to have somebody, us or some generation, live for 1,000 years again at the end of this? Like it says in Revelation, 1,000-year millennial reign. What if he did that? And what if we have something to do with that? And it's like, what? I wanted to go to heaven. Yeah, but he said the earth is be for the righteous. And it's like, Yeshua came back from the dead and walked around for 40 days and then took off. And he's supposed to be coming back. What does that mean? What does that mean? Okay, so real quick, we're getting near the end here, but the last phrase of verse 2, draw near to Elohim, he will chafatz, or one who has desire. That word kufresh bet tov, draw near, battle game, match, approach, or offer a sacrifice. Well, why do people fast? Why do people offer a sacrifice? To get his attention, to allow us to draw near. But this says, draw near as one who has the desire voluntarily to have the pleasure, the desire to draw near to him. And it seems like this, he says it looks like they're doing that, but then are they not? Verse 3, why do we fast and you don't see? Our ayin nun yod nun vav is the suffix for we, our ayin nun hang, we have burdened our nephesh and you don't know. Behold, on the day of you fast, tav mem zadi aleph, which is to find, inventory, or encounter, delight, vekal ayin zadi bet, atzav yod kaf mem suffix. Well, that's grief, sorrow, sadness, pain, hurt, toil, idle, image, form, fashion, shaped, vexed, and nerves. And then tav nun gimel shin vav, which is being draw near, approach, or collide, or conflict, or drive, press, oppress, tyrannize each other. He's saying These guys, in verse 2 of Isaiah 58, you look like you're doing all the spiritual things you're supposed to do. But really, in your heart, in your nephesh, you're beating the hell out of each other. You're taking advantage of each other. You're vexing. You're scraping the nerves with sorrow and grief and kicking people out of their houses and extorting them with finances and taking the food out of their mouth. It's like, don't you think there's enough to go around? And it was his people doing it to each other. Verse 4, behold, lariv, the contention, ve'matzah, which is to find, but it's strife and contention. Tazom, that's the word zadivav mem, which is to fast. So is he saying, behold, for contention and strife, they fast? Vav lamed he kaf. Well, lamed kaf means to you, but this is kaf av tav, that's just plural. Kaf av nun is direction, guidance, and alignment. And then here's this word bet aleph gimel resh pei. Well, gimel resh pei, GRP, grip. Aleph, Agrip. Hey, that's the name of that guy in the New Testament, Agrippa. He was wasn't he the governor? Agrippa. Reshin ayin, evil, wicked. Lo ta zomo, kayom, not fasting like the day. Lamed he shin mem yod ayin. That's listening. The interesting thing, the word sukkah, Sukkot, plural, Samet Kaf, Bob Tav, plural, but Samet Kaf Tav means listening. What's that got to do with thatched branches? It's kind of like I picture that as being hand in hand or voice in ear, walking together. The word Sukkot, listening. Well, that's also Shema. What about Sukkot has to do with listening? Marom, there's that word reshvav mem again, to lift up or elevate. Bamar, mem resh is the word for bitter, then kol kam. He's basically saying, your fasting means nothing to me. It's like John says in the New Testament, if you say you love Elohim, but you hate your brother, you torment your neighbor, you're fooling yourself, you're lying to yourself. Prove you love Elohim by loving your neighbor. This is basically saying the same thing. So anyway, just the last thing. If you, going back over 58 verse 1, where it says, Vela bet Yaakov chatatam, in the house of Jacob their sins. The word tet aleph there, spin, deflected, postponed, declined, thrust away, conjugated, joined, like hybrid. So when you say, repent sinners, you're doing that wrong, stop, the word for sin there, het tet ayin, het tet aleph, to find favor. It's also the word for sin, it means to find favor, cleaned, purified, disinfected. He bore loss. The word wheat is het tet hay, similar. We, being the house of Jacob, have taught one another to not walk in the ways of his Torah. And so we have, by sinning, because somebody else told us it's a sin to do what he said, so we're not going to do what he said, so we can trust and rely on the favor of the sacrifice of Yeshua. We have actually thrown like a net to catch fish. We have thrown away his promises, which is the stipulations of the eternal covenant. And we didn't even know it. The word yod ayin kuf bet, Jacob. Kuf bet hey means stomach, womb, or vaulted, like a vaulted room, lifted up like a zadi bet. And it's a measure of capacity. It means to raise up. It's the word we get for cube, like the Kaaba stone in Mecca, and make a hole or a pit, a wine vat. The ayin vav kuf, just looking real quick at the very end here, we're going to look at a couple other words with those letters, ayin, kuf, and bet. Ayin tav kuf, sometimes you can put a tav in between the letters, it means translate or transliterate shunt forward through the generations. It's where you get the word attic, or put valuable things in the attic and bring them forth and pull them out for another generation. Ayin Vav Kuf is a rung of a ladder, or that which is trodden upon. It also means to be pressed and oppressed, hard, hindered, prevented, or impeded. Ayin Vav Kuf Bet, Jacob with a Vav put in, means following or tracing. A rung of a ladder, that which is oppressed and hindered and prevented. If you look at the word Ayin Dalet, as in the word Moedim, Ayin Dalet Yod is choice, best treasure, bejeweled, ornamented, adorned. Yod Ayin Dalet, to appoint, to designate, fixed, arranged, or summoned to a date. That's where you get the word Moedim. It also means mission, objective, destination, and target. Yod Ayin Vav Dalet, promise, destiny, and one's fiancé, or to be betrothed. So Yahweh said to Yaakov, to Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, David, the whole family, Israel, you alone have this mission, this target, this destiny. My people, no other people group. You can't look at any other nation, any other religion, any other church and say, hey, how are they doing it? Where's their truth? That's not the truth of Yahweh's heritage people, Israel. You guys were appointed to declare my identity and Haggadah, my story, the legend of my reputation as I determined it to be, and somehow it's carried in the Moedim. So last week, I said something about, hey, can people sit there, read the Moedim? We can talk about that in the after show, but let me just say this. If you just look at the meanings of the words, the 7 words, which are the titles of the Moedim, Pesach means to jump over. If you jump over a threshold, it's like crossing a river. It's the same word as Hebrew. So Pesach is like, you were slaves, now you're Hebrew. Now you've crossed over. Abraham, you were a Chaldean. Your dad was making idols of Elohim Achrim. Now you're mine, and you're the great father of the new people group, the new consciousness. Matzot is not just unleavened bread, but the word matzah means find out how to do something. I mentioned that a few minutes ago. Become Hebrew, find out how to do something. Shavah, which is either the 7, Shin Berayin, but it also means vow or curse, counting 7 sevens and becoming fully surfeited or satisfied, fully satisfied. Well, if he said, if you come back, I will restore my favor and I'll wipe out your enemies. That hasn't happened yet. So he can't end this planet, this run of the earth, until he restores his favor to his people after 2010, which is us now coming back to learn to read and doing his stuff, sitting down on Shabbat and keeping the Moedim. That was a prerequisite, which we're doing. The next was Teruah, make a shout of rejoicing. And then Kipparim. Kippar means covering, atonement. And then as we were reading in Isaiah 58, release the captives. Am I telling the truth? Sukkot, covering. Hidden protection, listening. And then Shemini, the word Shemin is oil. Shemini is also the number 8. And it also means to assess, evaluate, appraise the value, synonym with the word ayin resh kaf, Eric. Atzar ret. Atzar means stop. It's almost like he said, Sukkot lasts for 7 days. And if you can appreciate it, one more stop, one more day, just one more day. It's like, wow, that was a great concert. Will you please come out, you musicians, the band, will you come out and play just one more song? We just can't let it go yet. 7 days of Sukkot. The previous 6 festivals, can we just have one more day? Shemini Atzeret. And most people consider Shavuot to be 2 festivals, so Shemini Atzeret doesn't exist as a festival. They may call it Simchat Torah, where they rewind the Torah scrolls. But if you see Shavuot as one 50-day counting festival, then Shemini Atzeret is the 7th festival. Not many people will tell you that. Todd Bennett will, and there's a few others, but can you appreciate or evaluate the great significant worth of all this stuff? That's the word Shemini. My oil. Is that what the 5 bridesmaids were missing in that parable? Didn't have oil? The word oil means consider its value. Stop one more day. I'm going to give you one more day. That's it. Okay, anyway, we're at the end of time here. But I'm suggesting that these 7 Moedim can be placed in an order like beads on a chain as a stream of consciousness that Yahweh wants his people to think this way. And to pick them up and throw them out. I got nothing to do with that stuff. Well, thank you, Mr. Churchman, for making it clear where your heart is. So I don't have to feel bad about not being there anymore. Now I got to figure out, where does Yahweh want my heart to be? And he says, run with me, walk with me along this path with voluntary intention.
Thank you for these words. Thank you for sharing with us your bread. Thank you for sharing with us your time. And it is such an honor to honor you, Abba. May these words penetrate our hearts so that we can pour forth the living waters that you have breathed into us today. Thank you, Abba. May all that hear, and all that see. In your precious name, we ask of these things. Amen.